Okay, I think we're live. Yay!
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Woohoo.
Hi everyone. It's Lily. You should know that because you're on my channel. So welcome to the first live show for the Perfectly Queer Book Club, which is a book club that I co-host with Molly.
Hello.
Molly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Molly from Mind of Molly, as you can see there. Is all of our stuff linked in the
Yeah.
description?
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know what else to say about myself.
Just say your pronouns. How you identify?
Oh, she, her pronouns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, same she, her pronouns, just in case anyone's joining before. 1 second. So yeah, this is our first live for the Perfectly Queer Book Club. So if you are just joining and you don't know exactly what this is, the Perfectly Queer Book Club, we basically just started it because me and Molly just wanted to read more queer books together. But also we wanted to learn more about queer history and queer culture. So we read alternately between fiction and nonfiction every month. So this month was nonfiction. And the book that we read in July was Zami, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde. So if you haven't read the book, I thought I'd just do a little blurb explanation of what it is. So Zami is a biomythography by Audre Lorde. So basically it tells her story in this kind of format that mixes fact and fiction. And it talks about her experience growing up Black and gay between the 1930s and 1950s in New York City. So it is autobiographical, but like you don't know exactly what is true and what isn't within the book, which is a really interesting part of it. And Audre Lorde, if you don't know, was a revolutionary Black feminist with her poetry published regularly during the 1960s alongside contemporaries such as Langston Hughes. She then went on to co-found the first US publisher for women of color in the 1980s, and she was the state poet of New York from 1991 to 1992, and then she passed away in November of 1992. So that's just a little background about the book and who Audre Lorde was. So let's get started. Do you want to chat about our overall feelings about the book?
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly say, like, I know you've got the video linked in the description, but there's a video about who is it?
It's Maz Hedgehog.
Yeah, so they've done a video about this, and I think it was really important that it's really good that Audre Lorde like acknowledges the fact that it is an autobiography, but at the same time, there's only so much you can remember from when you were younger. And that's why she wanted to say, like, part of it was fiction, like, are the dates added up correctly? Like, that was, I think,
that was the thing when I was reading it. Yeah, I was like, are these dates adding up? I was like, did all that happen when she was like 19? Yeah. I was like, wow. And it was only when I like went and watched Maz's video where she talks a bit about it being a biomythography and how that blurs fact and fiction that I kind of all started to make sense for me a little bit. So me and Molly have both watched it. We'd really recommend you go watch it. Maz is a queer Black fat woman, and so her perspective on the book is really, really important, I think, to listen to. And she discusses a lot of really, really great things. So that's linked in the description box down below. Alongside also there's an interview with Audre Lorde linked down below from the 1980s when this was published, which is really interesting, and she reads from the book as well, which is just amazing. So please go check those links after the live show if you want to. Yeah, what were your overall feelings of it? Have you given it a rating? Because rating memoirs is like a bit weird.
I gave it 5 based on like just how open she was in general about like discovering her queerness. I think like that was kind of really important and something that a lot of people like. It's so like it took her so long to figure like everything out.
Yeah.
Which is what I think people need to realize, that you don't need to have like a set labels straight away. Like it's okay to like be on a journey and like figure things out over time. Yeah. And it was also just the way it was written was so poetic. It was beautiful. Like, yeah, I couldn't not give it 5 because I adored every second of it.
Yeah. So I finished it yesterday and I haven't given it a rating yet because I wanted to just sit with it for a bit, because often with memoirs, it's like how it sits with me is how I rate it and feel about it as time goes on. And I can already tell that this one is going to be one like I recommend to lots of people, because just like the things that she talks about and all the themes in it, and like you said, the writing is just so beautiful. Like I knew she was a poet, but like it just comes across so clearly within the book. So I think I'm leaning towards giving it 5 stars. It was either going to be like a 4.5 or a 5. I just wanted to see if it was definitely going to be a 5. But I think I'm along a similar lines. I just thought like it was so beautiful, and I read it in like little 30-page chunks, which I'm really glad I did. I could properly like sit with it and like think about everything she was talking about in each section.
Because it's so dense, like it's beautifully written and easy to read, but there's so much information like included in it that it's, I agreed, like we didn't even discuss that until like later on when we were nearly finished it, that we both done it in like small little chunks.
And let us know how you thought in the comments, like just let us know your thoughts and feelings as we discuss different things. So yeah, the next thing I just have in my notes is just to we chatted a little bit about the biomythography thing, but I agree. I thought it was really interesting because I read a lot of memoirs, and obviously you read them and you're like, oh, how much is this actually true? Especially if they're childhood stuff. You're like, when they like write out conversations, you kind of know in your mind that's not probably how the conversation exactly went. That's how it plays in their mind. And I thought actually it was really interesting of her to be so honest about the fact that she was like, you know, this might not have been true. This might just exist in her memory. Things might be blurred in terms of the timeline and stuff.
I completely agree with you there.
So yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. Is there anything you want to talk about in particular, Mol?
I think a prominent feature that kind of was shown throughout it was how like independent Audre was. Even when she was getting in relationships and stuff, she was a very, very independent person. Like she didn't rely too much on her family or friendships. And especially with some of the things that have happened, like with her friends and stuff, I feel like she kind of just had to learn to be independent, because it was like, I can't trust people to like stick around for the whole time.
Something that I think came across really strongly to me is like, I felt like she was always really surrounded by people, and like she always had people around her, like whether it was her family or, you know, she mentions constantly how like she shares apartments with her friends and stuff, but how she often felt so lonely within that, and like she was very independent like within that kind of circumstance, if you see what I mean. Like she had all these people around her and yet she was so independent within herself, which I thought was like a really interesting juxtaposition. And I think that's like a big thing that stood out to me actually, was like her loneliness throughout the book. Just seemed so evident, like even like you say with all these people around her, she has, you know, different lovers and
even was it Maz, did you say?
Maz,
even she said that she, like in her video, like, and I was like, I'm glad that it's not just me that thought that out of all the people that experience so much loneliness within the book, Audre's was by far the most like profound and like the loneliest, which was sad. If anyone is joining that hasn't read the book yet, I did just want to point out that there is potential trigger warnings for suicide in there.
Also, there is quite a descriptive section that talks about an abortion. Just fair warning with that as well, because I didn't know that going into the book.
I didn't either. I didn't even know about the suicide part either.
Oh yeah, and it was quite descriptive. Both of those parts are quite emotional, definitely. So yeah, I got Ginger and Jenny confused at the beginning a lot, just because they came in quick succession and they both began with a G, and I think it was later on in the story I was like, wait, which one was Ginger, which one was Jenny?
But then also like Jill and Jean.
Yeah. So
I was like,
but then I don't know if that was intentional or not. Maybe. But I think that was partly though because I read it in smaller chunks and sometimes I'd have gaps. So then I would get back into the book and be like, wait, who's this? And be like, I don't remember how they fit into the story, which is what's happening with my current read, because I've been reading it like in dribs and drabs, and every time I pick it up there's like loads of characters and I'm like, who is what again? Something I thought was really interesting, and I noted it like really early on, was her lack of capitalization on certain countries, like the United States and England. She didn't capitalize the United States or England or Germany, but she did capitalize Mexico, which I just thought was interesting. I don't know how much I have to say about that, but I just wanted to bring it up because I just thought it was interesting, especially as like with the United States, of how it's like, I mean, my impression from having been there for a few months and stuff is like they're very like, you know, you got to respect the flag and respect the country, and I felt like that was her own little form of rebellion almost against the country in a way, like by not capitalizing it and not giving it that prowess, I guess is the word I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I also, a factor I really liked was the way she integrated like poetry within the text as well.
Yeah.
But it was like so seamlessly part of the story, but you could tell which parts were like poetry and what wasn't.
Yeah. And it like flows so well in the story just because her writing is so poetic anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely. And something Maz brought up in her video as well that I wanted to touch on, which I thought was such a quietly way done. It was so quiet the way it was done, but I thought it was also kind of revolutionary in it. Just the way that like bodies are described in this, in particular like fat bodies, and how they are so celebrated in this book. And she constantly describes fat women as like being glorious and beautiful, and like describes herself that way as well, which you just don't see a lot. And I think especially like, you know, for the time that she lived in, when, you know, I mean, it's the same nowadays, to be honest, but like, I just think like she was so like her thoughts and everything were so different.
Even just like the descriptions of like women's hairiness and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was so normalized, and obviously that was quite a big thing for the time period, because like it wasn't such a big thing back then as it is now, for being like, oh, you have to shave, you have to wax, blah blah blah. But like reading this now, like I really appreciated that, because it was like, do you know what, yeah, it's like not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting, like how maybe something she put in there back then, although she wrote this in the 80s, I believe, so I think that maybe was when shaving and waxing started coming into fashion. But how, like you say, like that was fairly normal in the 1950s, and then like nowadays it's like, you know, there's the whole thing about shaving, and like, you know, it's really hot right now, and I was like, do I really, like, do I have to? It's like you don't. It's all society's pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think this book just so wonderfully centers women, like so much, and I think by nature of like the fact, like, you know, her relationships are with women and everything, but like I just loved how many women she features, and especially we were talking just before this about the epilogue and how she says, like, what does she say?
Should I read it? Because I've tapped it. Every woman I have ever loved has left her print upon me, where I loved some invaluable piece of part of myself apart from me, so different that I had to stretch and grow in order to recognize her. And in that growing, we came to separation, that place where work begins, another meeting.
Yeah, I just, like, that summed it all up for me. But yeah, just like all the different women she encounters, and how even if they weren't always the nicest to her, like so many she describes in such loving ways, and she like treats them in the narrative with like a lot of kindness and empathy. I just thought it was like really beautiful. I was like, I was like, women are so amazing.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk a bit about like the queer aspect of this book, as it is the Perfectly Queer Book Club?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Yeah, like I thought it was interesting because it's there's never like an explicit bit where she's like, and this is when I realized I was gay, like, because it was just such a natural thing to her.
Yeah.
And it came across really clearly, like in her early friendships, and like how affectionate she was with them. Yeah, I feel like it was almost normalized in a way, but also like she did also make it so clear how this wasn't illegal back then, and they had to hide, and they had to, you know, you could only really be out and stuff in gay bars and stuff.
Yeah, I actually, that just reminded me of a piece that I highlighted near the end of the book. where she says, most Black lesbians were closeted, correctly recognising the Black community's lack of interest in our position, as well as the many more immediate threats to our survival as Black people in a racist society. It was hard enough to be Black and female, to be Black, female and gay, to be Black, female, gay and out of the closet in a white environment, even to the extent of dancing in the bagatelle was considered by many Black lesbians to be simply suicidal.
Yeah.
Like, just...
Yeah.
It's sad. Like, obviously, like, we've progressed so far, but it's sad to think that, like, a lot of people felt like they had to stay in the closet, which is obviously a big thing, especially when that is such like that time period, especially is when like gay culture was like really becoming prominent. But they forget to mention that for Black people in particular, like it wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
Which is why it was really good that it was definitely explored and in detail. In this, and especially when Audre says some of her experiences at gay bars with stuff that like white women have said to her, like
and she talks a lot in it about how white the scene was at that time and how all the Black lesbians that she went to the bars with, they all knew each other, but then they didn't talk to each other very much. They were quite isolated from themselves. I was listening to an interview that Audre Lorde did, and I linked it in the description box down below, so you guys can listen to that if you want to. She did that in the 1980s, and it's been uploaded to YouTube. And she talks in that interview about how, like, her isolation, she felt more often came from her Blackness rather than being a lesbian, and how the lesbians all had this kind of collective group, but she always still somehow, like, she still felt separate from it because of her Blackness, and how that, you know, there were times in the book where some of her lesbian friends would be like, well, we're all the same. And it's like, she was like, no, because our experiences are different. Yeah, no, exactly this. And how they didn't acknowledge how their experiences were different compared with the Black woman.
This is another bit that I highlighted around the same point with what you were saying about how it was definitely more her Blackness that made her feel secluded and different, when it's written in italics in that part on 268. Being women together was not enough, we were different. Being gay girls together was not enough, we were different. Being Black together was not enough, we were different. Being Black women together was not enough, we were different. Being Black dykes together was not enough, we were different. Like, no matter what little pocket you'd think that she'd want to like feel included in, she was always left out in some way. Like, she was always different.
Yeah. And that was like the way she explained that, I think, was so clear, and also so powerful. Like, it just put it out like in really clear terms, how that worked within like how she felt personally, but also like kind of on a structural basis at the same time. But I found like just the exploration of gay culture in this really interesting, like within the time period, because I think I was talking to someone at work about this today, and how, you know, when you think about like sort of gay culture and stuff, you think of the 1960s and the 1970s, but you don't really think about the 40s and the 50s, which is what she's writing about. How everyone, they were kind of all together and kind of out but with each other, but then not, and how they all use signals. In particular, like something that stood out to me was all the clothing she talked about, how like if she's wearing dungarees, that was like a sign for her, you know, that was her signaling I'm not straight, like to other queer people. And I found like the bit that I didn't particularly know, I kind of knew this in the back of my mind, but also didn't know, was that the whole 3 pieces of women's clothing. So when they went to the gay bars, they had to make sure they were wearing 3 pieces of women's clothing so they wouldn't be arrested, because if they weren't, that was enough to be arrested. Which also goes into like how violence against trans people was back then, and and also just stuff like how the bars would like shut up every single year. Like a bar would be around for a year and then it would close, and then they'd have to move on and find somewhere else. I found all of that very interesting. And she talks a lot about, you know, the like butch femme binary, and how she felt kind of excluded as well from the scene, because she didn't play into that kind of role playing situation, and she kind of felt like she was on the spectrum somewhere, didn't like to fit into the butch or the femme role.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Which is interesting.
Yeah,
I think nowadays, like, you know, you can kind of be anything if you're queer, but then it was so strict and like how you present it.
But even then though, like, I do think a lot of that is still very prominent now, especially in the lesbian community. Like,
yeah, no, that's true.
With a lot of femme lesbians as well, and just like femme queer people, a lot of people go, "Oh, you don't look gay."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what does being gay look like?
Yeah, exactly. But then also on the other, like, there's also, like, I think there was a discussion about this on Twitter, I feel like a while ago, about how in a lot of books at the moment, like, that feature queer girls, there isn't a lot of like butch girls that are represented in books about queer girls, and a lot of them are femme, and so it's interesting, like, you know what I mean, what does get featured and what doesn't, and then the different discussions in the community.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition there.
I'm trying to find something that I highlighted that wasn't to do with Audrey's queerness. It was to do with her growing up in her family. Oh, here it is on chapter 8, like right at the start. It's the only thing that I actually like wrote a little annotation by that was like, I felt this with my entire being.
Yeah.
Because it's just the feeling of like not wanting to be wrong, like growing up and like impressing your family and your parents. When she says, as a child, the most horrible condition I could contemplate was being wrong and being discovered. Mistakes could mean exposure, maybe even annihilation. In my mother's house, there was no room in which to make errors, no room to be wrong. And I was like, yeah, right? I read that and I was like, oh my God, wow. Yeah. I feel attacked.
Yeah, literally. I remember reading that and being like, okay. Because like, I remember as a kid, I hated being in trouble. Like, literally would get like anxiety attacks about being in trouble as a child. I hated being wrong. I hated being in trouble. That line, I forgot about that line. I must have tabbed it, but I've got so many tabs in my book at this point that I'm like, and I didn't color code it particularly. I should have color coded it. I just kind of threw in tabs where I thought.
Oh, I didn't either. I made it so that it went in like a nice cohesive color. So I went from dark purple to light purple to blue to green.
That's so cool.
But I knew that I weren't really going to be picking up on themes within this mainly. I was mainly like, the way it's written, it's just so easy for all the themes to blend together, but it's more about just really important passages that she speaks about.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel like.
You know what? I really liked how her name originally had a Y at the end. That was a bit unhighlighted, and I was like, do you know what? I love that. Like the fact that she was so young and she's like, no, do you know what? I don't like the Y at the end of my name because it doesn't go along in a line. Like when she was like, I did not like the tail of the Y hanging down below the line in Audrey and would always forget to put it on, which used to disturb my mother greatly. I used to love the evenness of Audre Lorde without the Y at 4 years of age. And I'm like, and that like really stuck out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? I was like, good for you. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I thought that was really interesting. I found her childhood reflections really interesting. I think what's funny, when I was reading it, I was like, how does she remember this much? And then after I watched Maz's video, I was like, because she's made some of it up, obviously, and it's just what she can recollect or what she can remember. Because I think that's like the same with all of us. Like, I tell stories from my childhood, but I'm like, oh, I was like 4 or 5. I don't know if that's quite how it went down, but that's how it exists in my mind. But that doesn't make it like, I don't know, I have this whole thing because I did history as a degree, but like, and everyone's like, oh, history is all about facts. And I'm like, not really. It's all about whoever's perspective you're reading from, really.
Yeah.
Which has some truth to it, but it's their truth. It doesn't mean it's the truth. So although you could look at this book and say, oh, like, it's not factual, but it is her truth. And I think that is still super important. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that. I don't know where I was going with that, but that'll do.
I've got so many tabs I'm trying to think of.
Yeah. And just, I found her bravery incredible. Like the fact that she just like moved to New York at 17. Like, yeah. I know it was
And then she's like, do you know what? I want to go to Mexico.
Yeah,
so I'm going to go to Mexico.
And she just like went to Mexico. I found the whole Mexico bit so interesting because like just in general, like Mexico is somewhere I would really like to visit, but just like I feel like that section of the book really stood out to me, and I feel like she did a lot of growing there, and kind of found herself a little bit, as it were. And like her relationship with Eudora, I think that's how you say her name, Eudora, was
I think so.
Was really interesting. And how open Eudora was with her as well. Like she was straight up like, I'm not a good influence, like you shouldn't get attached, like yeah. And all the community stuff, like this whole community of like she just happened to stumble upon this like community of queer women, and it's that whole thing of like queer people will just find each other like no matter what.
Gaydar's a thing.
I just thought that was and like all their like little dynamics with each other. It was all very like there was a lot of internal drama, I feel like, within her community, and not in like I don't say drama like lightly. I mean like genuine relationships and breakdowns of those relationships and how that affected the community.
Yeah. I really, for the most part, liked her relationship with, is it Muriel? Was that her name?
Muriel's the main one, like that was like the
the one like right near the end.
Yeah, not the last one, but Muriel, yeah.
I really liked that relationship. I mean, it's horrible what happened in the end.
Yeah.
But I feel like that was quite a pivotal turning point for Audre, because that was when she was like, you know what, like I can commit to a woman.
Yeah.
Like I can actually have commitment.
Yeah.
And I know how to love someone, and that's something that I deserve.
Yeah.
That was a really incredible moment. And that was like, even though she'd had her heart broken by like other women before, especially with what happened with Muriel near the end, because it is the first time she'd like properly committed and like had a very serious relationship, it must have hit like 10 times harder. And
you definitely get that, like when their relationship is breaking up, like the heartbreak. I felt like the emotions in this book came across so vividly. Like when she was getting to Muriel, I could like feel her joy like seeping through the pages, and like I was like really happy reading it. I was like, oh my god, this is so lovely. Like and then when she and Muriel's relationship fell apart, especially like the way she describes it of Muriel, like she didn't just leave, like she slowly moved out of the apartment and slowly left her life. And she still saw Muriel later on, because it was such a small community of people. Like she would still see her in bars later on, like crying and stuff.
Yeah.
Muriel's section was the most interesting and emotional to me. Yeah, it's definitely like one of the standout sections for me. And like Muriel's like one of the women I can remember like very clearly, and like her story as well and everything.
And that was also a point in time when she really, like Audre herself, really experimented. Like it was mainly with Muriel that she discovered like having threesomes and like having polyamory.
Yeah.
Not even really threesomes, it was just like more another person in the relationship that each partner slept with.
Non-monogamy, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Non-monogamy.
I guess. I don't know.
But so that's why I think that was quite a standout section, because it was really about her finding herself, her likes, her dislikes in being a lesbian and being gay and proper exploring. And it was, I feel like, a time where she fully felt accepted. Like even obviously there was the moments, because there was the moments in that when like there would be white women at the bars like being racist to her and Muriel. But it was a time when she really felt accepted, especially when she was talking about the gay bars and how she was saying that the owner of that one particular gay bar, even though it shut down, like really had a soft spot for her and Muriel. Like it really felt like she was coming into her own during that point.
Yeah, and I feel like then it's like when she feels like I like that bit where Muriel talks about like what she'd done all year, and like she'd gotten a really good job and she'd started back at college.
Yeah.
She finally got a job that she enjoyed at the library, because like some of those jobs, man, like I've worked some crappy jobs, but some of those jobs were like, good lord, like it reminded me of like the things that women, like the jobs that women had to do back then, like were dangerous, genuinely dangerous. So it was just like a whole lot. And I found like reading about Muriel so hard, especially like with the whole mental health and the fact that she had schizophrenia, and whenever she talked about being treated with shocks. And again, it just shows like I mean, we still have a long way to go, but like how far we have come in that. You know, it was only what, like 60, 70 years ago. It really wasn't long ago at all.
No.
And that just, and you know, I think she then ended up in like a few institutions, and it's just really, really hard to read about.
Yeah. And then was it Jenny, the one that committed suicide?
Jenny, yeah. So yeah, Jenny died by suicide. Yeah.
And it's just heartbreaking that she like the way it was written, like in the sense of the way Jenny kind of dealt with it, especially the first time when she attempted it.
Yeah.
It was almost so nonchalant.
Yeah.
Like the way she was very much like, yeah, I'm going to kill myself at the end of summer.
Yeah. But also that so many people like, didn't take her seriously, so...
Yeah, I know.
And then even when people didn't take her seriously, but then they still let things happen. Do you know what I mean? Like they still, like she moved out and to live with her dad, and then her dad was abusive, and then she felt like she couldn't... Do you know what I mean? And like...
Yeah.
Oh, that was so hard to read about.
I know. Like, it was just horrible. And it's the way, like... It was when it was like Jenny said that she was annoyed at herself for botching the job, but satisfied at the outcome. Like, because that was when she wanted to go and live with her dad.
Yeah.
But then that ended up just being like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Horrible. Yeah. And I really like feel like that was, I mean, it was such a loss and such a turning point for Audre, and like I don't know, I didn't relate to the aspect of it, but like just the age you're at, like at 15, you're at such a weird time in your life, and like
so vulnerable, and like
exactly, like not to go into my life, but like I lost someone at 15, and it's just like you just like don't know how to, you don't even really understand what death is at that point, and so it's I really connected with her on that point, and then that's how she connected with Muriel later on, because they were both 15 when they lost these women who were so important in their lives. I found that really interesting. And just making me emotional when I think about it.
Yeah, I know. Like, it is such a hard thing to discuss, but it's so important.
Definitely.
Like, it was so important.
Yeah. I feel like she covered so much in this, like, and even like the whole part of her seeking out a back alley abortion, like, and it was just like that was just the norm.
Yeah.
Like I mean, me and Mollie live in the UK, and we've had abortion rights here for a long time, and they're not really contested here. But like I know in England they haven't been contested very much. In Northern Ireland, obviously, they only just got the right to an abortion this year, I think, or last year.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's like, it's just things that she had to go through, and like she had to go to work so that she could pay her rent.
Yeah.
And like the dangers of it, like she fully went in there knowing like she could die, but just like makes me even more very family pro-choice.
Like, it was such a difficult time, and like even when she felt like when she discovered she was pregnant, she felt so trapped.
Yeah.
So like for her, like seeking out a back alley abortion was like there was no other option, because being pregnant, she felt so incredibly trapped that she was just like, I can't go through with that. And I feel like that's something that's really important, because a lot of people forget, especially with the whole pro-life, pro-choice arguments, that a lot of people don't ask to become pregnant.
No, because there was even a part where I don't think it was in the same section, but there was even a part where she talked about she had a relationship with, there was a man who raped her at some point, wasn't there? I'm sure that was a part of the book. I can't remember where that was.
I think so.
I don't think it was in the same bit, but I remember in that part with the abortion, she was talking about the guy that she was with and how she didn't realize that sex could be good or fun until she was with women, pretty much. And everyone just kind of told her to suck it up, and like that's how it is for us. Yeah, there's just so much that's changed.
Yeah, but that's what makes things like this so important, because sometimes we forget how far we have come, but also how far we still need to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, I just think like reading any queer history is so important, but especially like reading like narratives from queer people pre like Stonewall is so important. Just because like, you know, people have been here for so long. And another bit that I remembered it earlier and then I forgot, was how there was a really powerful bit where she talked about how her and her friends who were lesbians, they had no like map, like they had to make it all up themselves. Like they had to set that precedent. Like they didn't know how to have relationships necessarily with each other in terms of a long-term relationship. You know, there wasn't marriage like there is for heterosexual people as like a roadmap. They didn't like they had to pioneer it themselves. There were no pioneers before them. Really, like there was a couple books I think around at the time that she talked about she read, but even then when she was talking about when they started up like a non-monogamous situation, like there were no books about that. Like they just had to go into the dark and figure that out for themselves. Which might be really hard for me. Yeah. There was a similar debate, I believe, in like there was a similar situation in Ireland for a long time. I think it was only happen if the mother's life was at risk, and that was only after a woman died in Ireland in 2012. And now they voted and they have abortion rights in Ireland, but it took a long time. I hope the situation in Brazil can change soon, because women deserve a choice and the autonomy of their bodies. Yeah. Is there anything else that anyone wants to mention or talk about? I feel like I've gotten through most of the points I wanted to bring up.
That's what I feel like as well, because a lot of the other tabs I have are just like quotes that relate to the topics we've already mentioned.
We've really gone like mishmashed like around a little bit. Oh, I just wanted to just mention something that I found out through listening to Audre Lorde's interview. So the last woman that she is with in the book, Kitty, or Aphrodite, Aphrodite is actually an African goddess within like mythology. And so Audre Lorde talks about how Aphrodite was the youngest child of the sky god, and she was the trickster and also the linguist, and is also an essential creative part of us all. So she's meant to shed light and confusion, but brings everything together inside herself. So like, and that is so true of like how she comes into the ending of this story. Because I feel like this doesn't end. You know, Audre Lorde went on to live on for another like 30 years, or 25, 30 years. So like, this wasn't the end of her story, but it was the end of that section of her life. Because I think she went on and got married to a gay man after that and had some children and stuff. So that was this is particularly about her youth. Yes, and coming into herself.
I've just stumbled across one bit. It's like literally not even that relevant in terms of like the important topics we're discussing, but it was just a bit that was like, I was just like, like it was her and Muriel's relationship, and it was just being like when they were just gradually moving in together, like slowly, and then it's like, and adopted 2 little scrawny black kittens, which we named Crazy Lady and Scary Lou.
I love their cats.
I was like, oh my god.
I was so sad about what happened to their cats. Like, I had a proper moment. If you are watching and you haven't read the book, there is some animal death in it. Like, fair warning. I know some people are sensitive to that, so. Yeah, honestly, like, books and TV and movies have been so essential in me like figuring out myself, and like discussions online, and people being out in the open, and they just didn't have any. But there were a few books, but like they had to get them, you know, from specific shops. And it also makes me think about the fact that Audre Lorde, obviously she grew up in Harlem, but she was able to move to the West Village and you know, how many women were there who were in the middle of the country who had similar experiences and feelings to her, who couldn't just move to the West Village and stuff. I mean, the fact that she did that was incredible. It was still incredible.
Yeah.
Like she did have that proximity, I suppose, to that area.
But also it's like what we were saying right at the beginning. She was so independent and not reliant on like her family and other people that I suppose she just must have had that mentality. She was like, oh, well, fuck it. Like,
she never did rely on other people. Like, she was so self-reliant, which I really admire. I thought I was independent, and then I was like reading this book. I was like,
right.
I was like, I'm not. I'm not this.
Literally. Like, she was such an incredible woman, and like, this is just a book that is going to really resonate with me for a long time. And that, like what we were saying before we even started the live show, Lils, like, is one that we're going to be recommending to people to read for like such a long time.
Yeah. And that's the thing with like rating memoirs is always a weird thing, but I always think about like how like it will stay with me, and like it's been a day, but I can already tell like our discussions, but also just like the themes and everything. I keep thinking about it, like I keep thinking about parts of the book, and I just think it's like she has such an interesting perspective, and such a unique perspective that we don't often see. And she was just like a super like amazing figure. Like she did so much in a time when people weren't doing that, and just admire her so much.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I went into this not knowing a lot about her.
Yeah, no, me neither. Like, I've never read any of her poetry or anything either, but now that I've read it, I'm like, wow, I want to go out and like buy her poetry and like read that.
Yeah, I know. I think she has a book called Sister Outsider, and I can't remember if it's essays or poetry. I think it might be essays.
Let me have a look. What was it called, did you say?
Sister Outsider or Sister Outside. We got it in at work, and I was like, oh wow, because we don't. I was saying to Molly just before we went on the live show, I work in a bookshop, and it's quite a small one though, so we don't get like a ton of variety in our stock. So I was quite surprised like when it came in. I think it's
this collection of her essential prose, essays, speeches, letters, interviews.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's just a collection of a lot of her different.
Yeah. Which explores race, sexuality, poetry, friendship, the erotic, and the need for female solidarity. Oh, I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So I think I will pick that up, and also some of her poetry. I'm not always super into poetry, but like her poetry examples that she left in this, and then just her writing, I'm like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm like, well, now I'm just intrigued, and like the emotion that was just in those like snippets of her poetry, I'm like, I'd love to read like a full piece of hers, and because she's so good at conveying emotion.
Yeah, like the emotion, like I said,
even talking about it, like my legs are shivering. Like I've like
teared up a couple times when we've been talking because I'm like, oh, yeah. No, I think like I said earlier, like basically when she was in sorrow in the book, I was like feeling it, and then when she was happy, I was feeling it. Like she got that emotion across amazingly. Like it was incredible. I think she was so talented. Truly. I think that's all I have to say. I think.
Same here. I think.
If you guys have any last thoughts, do leave them in the comments down below. If you're watching this back later, feel free to comment any thoughts that you had. We'd love to hear.
If you guys haven't been on the Twitter or seen any announcements, should we talk about August's book quickly?
Yeah, I've got it on my shelf. Let me grab it.
I'll hold it. You talk about it.
Oh,
Lily.
Yeah, mine's too stuck into my shelf.
Right.
Okay. So in August, which is now, we are reading The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta, which is a YA contemporary book with some magical elements. So it's about a girl called Dani who moves from Michigan to Northern California, and there she discovers this group of girls called the Greys, who are self-proclaimed witches, and one of their group has gone missing, and they believe Dani is the key to getting her back. And I've already read this before, so I'm revisiting it for the book club. It was one of my favorite books of last year. It is beautifully written, and it just is like basically a love letter to queer girls. It's just lovely. It genuinely is. Like, it's So there's just so much love between these queer girls, and they're so affectionate with each other, and it's just a really, really beautiful, magical story. So we would love it if you could join us in reading this. And we also have a guest host next month. We're starting off our guest hosts. So Kathy is going to be joining us. She runs the Queer Lit Readathon, which if you haven't checked that before, you should. All these links are going to be in the description box down below. And that's going to be on Mollie's channel on Friday, the 11th of September, 6 p.m. British Standard Time. So that's Friday at 6 p.m. So if you can join us, that would be grand.
Amazing.
And we have decided on our books and our guest hosts for the rest of the year. We are going to be announcing that soon. We just need to put together the announcement post, basically.
Yeah, and then obviously as the new year comes around, we will be more open. Well, we're open anyway to suggestions, especially from our guest host, but we'll be more, since we've got time now between now and the new year, for any books that you guys would be interested in reading. Let us know. Either you can message us on our personal accounts or on the Perfectly Queer Twitter, or even just in the comments below, any books that you'd be interested in reading.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I might at some point, I'm not sure. We're going to see how it gets to later in the year, but I know some people feel anxious about approaching people, so I might make a Google form for people if they want to be a guest host, and you can put suggestions as well. But we will have a chat about that. We have a Twitter account. Please follow it because most updates happen on there.
It's Perfectly Queer, but the L in perfectly is actually a capital I because I'm an idiot.
No, it's fine. Also, I think Perfectly Queer was taken. I'm pretty sure there was something about it that we couldn't work out.
It's linked in the description box anyway.
So yeah, we do all our updates on there. So if you could join us, that'd be grand. And that's everything I think for this.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. We really
thank you.
We hope you enjoyed. And stay tuned for more books next month. And if you are watching this and you haven't picked up Zami, then you should. Really great. I do think as well this is a great book to buddy read, to read with other people, because there's so much.
Yeah, because it's so many discussion points.
Yeah. So if you can read it with a book club or a friend, then would really recommend. And finally, do check out the video in the description box down below from Maz, because she talks about it from a perspective that me and Mollie cannot cover ourselves. And there's also the interview with Audre Lorde if you want to find her perspective, writing the book and why she wrote a biomythography. And you can also listen to her read it, which is just
I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, it's not a watch, it's just a podcast kind of thing. So
I can't wait to listen to that.
Clarify, because it's from the 80s, so someone just took the recording, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. And Mollie, do you have anything quickly you want to promote before we go?
I mean, I run another book club with M from A Little Writer M and Kira from Kira Foster. That's more not specific genre or anything. That's just where we each pick a book for whoever month's hosting. This month we're reading.
You have some great picks. I really want to read The Memory Police.
Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo.
Which is so good. It's good.
Amazing. And if you are going to read it, I would actually recommend listening to the audiobook along with it, because it literally felt like I was at a poetry slam and I loved every second of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got lots of...
Elizabeth Acevedo's audiobooks are incredible. I cannot, I just love her so much. She deserves the world.
Literally. But yeah, so that one will be on Kira's channel anyway, if you guys want to check that one out as well. But the Twitter account for that is EMC Squared Books. So yeah.
Cool. So that's everything for this. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you hopefully next month to read by Amy Rose Capetta, and we'll be joined by Kathy. That's exciting. Bye.